The train screeched into the station, metal grinding, and a blast of wind rattled the platform. She stood pressed against the cold railing, fingers curling around the handle of a small, battered suitcase. The leather strap had frayed at the edges, and a deep scratch marred its surface, a scar she couldn't explain, not yet. Her eyes flicked across the crowd, not really seeing anyone but scanning, searching. A mother pulled her child away from the edge. A businessman muttered into a phone. The announcement drone hummed overhead, but she barely noticed. Her gaze lingered on a familiar black car parked across the lot. She didn't move, didn't breathe fully. Her hands shook, partly from the wind, partly from the memory that had settled like dust in her chest. The red scarf around her neck whipped against her cheek. She tugged it closer, wrapping herself in the sharp smell of wool and perfume, as if it could shield her from what had happened, or what she was about to do. She remembered the office, the way the fluorescent lights had hummed above her last day, the sudden quiet that fell after HR had said it. "We're letting you go." No reason.
No explanación.
Just the sterile click of the door closing behind her, leaving her with the echo of her own heartbeat. Her gaze dropped to the cracked watch on her wrist. The glass had spidered into tiny fractures, yet it still ticked stubborn. She liked to think it survived everything, and maybe it could teach her to survive too. A gust of wind tangled her hair across her face. She brushed it aside, revealing eyes that were searching, calculating, remembering. She wasn't just watching the crowd. She was observing them, learning. Every movement, every pause, every little gesture could be useful, could be leverage. Her lips parted, silent. "They'll see me again," she whispered, but only to herself. Not like anyone would hear. Not like anyone would know. The train's whistle cut through the morning, high and insistent, dragging her out of the blur of faces. She shifted the suitcase to her other hand and stepped closer to the car, glancing at the driver through the tinted window. He didn't look up. He wouldn't. Not yet. And in that moment, when the crowd moved and the air smelled of rain and gasoline, when the wind hit her scarf and tugged at her sleeve, she felt it. A pulse of something raw, sharp, alive. Something that said, they have no idea what's coming. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her, and her stomach tightened. She didn't turn. Not yet. She walked alongside the black car, suitcase in hand, letting the wind tug at her red scarf as if testing her resolve. The driver's eyes never met hers, and the quiet felt deliberate, like he was letting her choose her next move. Or maybe just observing what she didn't yet understand about herself. A memory flickered. Her father, years ago, had handed her a worn suitcase almost identical to this one. "Carry it with care," he had said, voice rough but tender. "It holds more than clothes. It holds who you are, and who you'll become." She had laughed then, brushing the brown leather with a small hand. Now hers gripped the strap tighter, as if the bag itself could anchor her in a world that had tossed her aside. She scanned the station again. Families embraced, tears glimmering in the morning light. Children tugged at their parents' coats, laughter spilling into the air. And here she was, alone, the only sound the scrape of her shoes on the concrete, the rustle of her scarf, the faint tick of the cracked watch on her wrist. Financial worries gnawed at her, constant and quiet, reminding her that survival wasn't a choice, it was an obligation. Every job rejection, every closed door, had pushed her into corners she never wanted to know existed. Yet beneath the fear, a sharper pulse of determination grew. They had fired her without reason, dismissed her talent as if it were nothing. But she remembered the fire in her father's eyes, the way he said, "Never let someone else define your worth." She had carried that lesson hidden in this suitcase, packed it carefully between her clothes and old notebooks, and now it was her secret weapon. She noticed the stranger sitting on the bench a few meters away, the same black coat brushing against the cold steel. He didn't approach, didn't speak. He simply watched, an unreadable presence in the chaos. It unsettled her, how easily silence could feel heavy, and how keenly it could hold someone accountable without words. The train doors clanged, and a new wave of passengers spilled onto the platform. She stepped forward, suitcase rolling behind her, and paused as she saw a mother wave goodbye to her child. A pang of envy, a flicker of longing, and then the red scarf tightened around her throat as if it were a shield. The driver's hand brushed the door handle. She stopped, hesitating, caught between the desire to move forward and the sudden inexplicable fear that someone important was still watching. Her eyes met his rearview mirror reflection for a split second. The corner of his mouth lifted in a brief, confused smile, or maybe it was just a trick of the light. Her heart skipped. She wasn't ready. The suitcase felt heavier, the scarred leather pressing against her palm like a reminder. And in that hesitation, suspended between what was behind her and what awaited ahead, the station seemed to hold its breath along with her. Rain began to fall in hesitant drops, speckling the platform and turning the concrete dark and reflective. She hugged her red scarf tighter, the wool damp against her cheek, and watched as the stranger shifted in his seat. His worn shoes, scuffed at the toes, soles thin, caught her eye first, a small signal of a life weathered quietly. Then a glimpse of a folded photo peeking from his wallet when he adjusted it. A child's smiling face, edges curling like old paper. A private fragment he carried openly yet shielded from the world. For a moment, she imagined the weight of it, the hidden pain of someone who, like her, had lost something that could never be returned. It felt uncanny seeing a shadow of herself in him. Invisible mirror, she thought, a reflection she hadn't expected, in someone she didn't yet know. Thunder rumbled over the city, low and rolling, vibrating through the station's steel beams. The wind tugged at her scarf, tangled her hair across her face. The suitcase, with its deep scratch and frayed strap, felt heavier with every step she took. Inside it, memories and intentions intertwined, threatening to spill out if she let herself linger too long. She wanted to leave, wanted to retreat into the certainty of solitude, where she controlled every step. And yet, something about the stranger made her pause. Maybe it was the way he sat, patient and silent, as if he knew the rhythm of waiting better than she did. Maybe it was the glint of recognition in his eyes. Was it pity? Understanding? Or something more dangerous, something that made her heartbeat drum faster than it should have? The rain intensified, drumming on the metal roof, echoing her own anxiety. She could feel the pull of her own struggle mirrored in him. The same loneliness, the same silent rage against circumstances that had been unfair. And yet, she couldn't tell if this connection was fate, a collision meant to guide her, or manipulation, a trap disguised in empathy. She shifted the suitcase in her grip, dragging it a fraction closer. Her cracked watch ticked stubbornly, echoing through the small, shared space of silence. Time seemed to bend between them, stretching with questions that refused answers. "Why are you just watching?" she wanted to ask, but the words lodged in her throat. His eyes didn't waver, didn't blink fast enough to seem casual. He waited, letting her decide her next move, letting the storm outside become a mirror for the storm inside her. Lightning split the sky, sharp and sudden. She flinched, her fingers tightening on the suitcase, her heart skipping. Something unspoken hung in the wet air between them, heavy and electric. And then she stepped forward and stopped. The choice for once was not clear. The station lights flickered as the rain drummed harder, spilling in silver streaks across the windows. She tightened her scarf, breath uneven, and gripped the handle of her battered suitcase. For a moment she turned her back on him, on the silence that tethered them, and took 3 slow steps toward the train doors. Each step felt like betrayal, like walking away from something unnamed but alive. Her chest burned. She stopped. The cracked watch on her wrist ticked louder in her ears, a stubborn reminder of time refusing to stop, even when she wanted it to. She looked down at the suitcase, her father's words echoing. "Carry it with care. It holds more than clothes." She turned her head just slightly and there he was, still sitting, still watching. This time, though, his hand rested casually against the suitcase handle she hadn't realized she'd let go of in her hesitation. The scarred leather looked different in his grasp, smaller, fragile, like it belonged not only to her story but to his as well. Their eyes met, and in the low hum of thunder, his voice finally broke the silence, rough but steady. "Some people carry more than just bags," he said. His thumb brushed the edge of the suitcase as if it were sacred. They carry silence. The words stung, almost too precise, as if he'd peeled open something she hadn't shown anyone. Around them, people whispered, glanced, judged in their quiet ways. A woman tugged her child closer, murmuring about strange people at stations. A man shook his head, lips pressed thin, his gaze sharp with dismissal. The world always seemed to find room for judgment, never for understanding. Her throat tightened. She reached out for the suitcase, but he didn't move right away. Instead, he tilted his head, eyes searching hers, not aggressive, not pleading, just knowing. The photo in his wallet flashed in her memory, the child's smile, the worn shoes, the patience. He was carrying something too, and suddenly she wasn't sure if she was afraid of it or drawn toward it. She tugged the suitcase free, holding it close now, pressing it against her chest as if to shield both of them. The scarf clung wet to her skin, the wool heavy with rain and unspoken words. The announcement overhead called for last boarding. A rush of passengers swept past her, brushing against her shoulders, throwing her off balance. She steadied herself, but not before their gazes locked one more time. Her lips parted, trembling with words that refused to form. She almost asked who he was. She almost told him she understood. But instead she turned halfway, suitcase in arms, heart in her throat, leaving the question alive between them, vibrating in the storm. And the silence followed her, heavier than any bag. The rain eased, but the air still carried the metallic scent of storms. She stepped off the train, suitcase clutched to her chest, trying to ignore the tremor in her hands. The announcement faded, replaced by the murmur of voices, the shuffle of hurried footsteps. She should have kept walking, should have left the silence behind. But something inside her pulled her gaze back. The stranger was no longer seated. He was standing now, coat damp, his hand slipping into his wallet again. She caught the flicker of that photo once more, the child's smile fading in a pocket worn thin. Then as he lifted his head, she saw something else. The embossed logo on the leather folder tucked beneath his arm. Her breath caught. The logo. She knew it instantly. The very company she had just applied to. Desperate and bruised from rejection. The company she had once given years of her life to before being dismissed without reason. And here he was, no ordinary man in the shadows. He was the one behind the door she'd been pounding on in vain. Her knees weakened. The suitcase strap dug into her palm as if reminding her not to drop it again. Carry it with care, her father's words echoed, looping back, louder now. Only this time the suitcase felt heavier, stranger. She remembered how the stranger's hand lingered on it, how his words had sliced her open. Some people carry more than just bags. They carry silence. And then it struck her. The way he'd touched the suitcase wasn't random. His gaze hadn't been on her. It had been on it. She lowered her eyes to the scarred leather. The scratch across its surface almost aligned with the crease in his photo. A thread pulled tight inside her. It wasn't just her suitcase. It had been his daughter's once. Her breath broke, a sharp inhale lost in the rush of passing commuters. Suddenly the bag in her arms wasn't just a vessel of her own survival. It was a vessel of his grief. And somehow, through fate or cruelty, it had landed with her. A tear slipped before she could stop it, hot against her cold cheek. She wiped it quickly, but he saw. His expression softened, just for a second, before retreating into something unreadable. She turned, gripping the suitcase as if it would split her apart. The cracked watch ticked like a countdown, louder than the rain outside. She was past the point of return now. Whatever lay ahead, she could no longer step back into anonymity. Her feet carried her forward, toward the glass doors of the building she thought she'd left behind forever. And as the doors hissed open, the silence between them followed her inside. The boardroom was too bright, too polished, the glass walls reflecting her own trembling figure back at her. She stood at the far end, suitcase on the table, red scarf damp and heavy across her shoulders. The cracked watch ticked steadily, as if mocking the silence that filled the room. Across from her he sat, not the stranger anymore, but the man with the power she had once begged for. The man who had quietly carried his grief like armor. For a long time neither spoke. Rain traced streaks down the glass behind him. The city blurred into gray. She remembered the first moment at the station, the crowd, the wind, her searching gaze. But now the roles had shifted. He was the one observing and she was the one being measured. "You carry it like it's yours," he said finally, nodding at the suitcase. His voice was calm, but there was a fracture underneath. She placed a trembling hand on the leather, the scar running across it like an old wound. "It is mine. Because I made it mine. Because I had nothing else left to hold." Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. "But I know it wasn't always." His jaw tightened. He reached across the table, fingers brushing the surface of the suitcase with a tenderness that undid her. It was hers. His eyes flickered with a memory she would never touch. And now it's found its way back. The air pressed heavy between them, thick with loss and recognition. She felt her father's words return, reshaped. "Carry it with care." Suddenly she understood. It wasn't about ownership. It was about carrying stories that outlived their owners. She pushed the suitcase toward him, every muscle in her body rebelling against the surrender. It was the one object tethering her to the past, to her father, to her fight. And yet she let it go. Her hands slipped back to her sides, empty. "I don't want it," he said softly. "Not anymore. I want someone who knows what it costs to carry silence, to turn it into something that speaks." His gaze held hers, unblinking. "That's why you're here. Not because you begged for a job, but because you remind me of what I lost, and what I need." It wasn't love. It wasn't mercy. It was recognition. He wasn't choosing her to save her. He was choosing her to save himself. The cracked watch ticked again, loud in the sterile room. She glanced at it, then at him. "Time doesn't heal," she whispered. "It only leaves marks." And with that, she knew her rebirth wasn't in what she gained, but in what she gave up. She walked out of the boardroom without the suitcase, without the shield she had clung to. The red scarf trailed behind her like a banner, catching the artificial wind of the air vents. Back in the station later that night, she paused by the railing where it had all begun. But this time her hands weren't shaking. She was lighter, though emptier. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay. But some leave you changed forever. The streets were quieter now, washed clean by the earlier storm. She walked alone, her red scarf trailing softly in the night wind, no longer heavy with rain, no longer clinging like a burden. Her steps were slower but steadier, measured not by fear, but by the strange calm that follows after everything breaks and reshapes. At home, she placed the cracked watch gently on the nightstand, the ticking no longer a countdown but a steady pulse in the background. The suitcase, though gone, still lingered in her mind like a phantom weight. She opened her drawer, slid her fingers over old letters, photographs, scraps of memory folded into paper. The absence of the suitcase left a space, but perhaps that space was its true gift. She sat by the window, watching the city lights blink like tired eyes. A whisper of her father's voice surfaced, worn but steady. "Carry it with care." She understood now. The care wasn't for the object, but for the life it represented, the resilience, the silent burdens people carry unseen. Somewhere in the reflection of the glass, she thought she saw him again. Coat dark, shoes worn, eyes patient. But when she blinked, it was only her own reflection, stronger than before. She smiled faintly, not out of joy but recognition. "Sometimes love is not romance," she murmured into the stillness. "It's recognition." The scarf shifted against her collarbone as though agreeing. She thought of him not as a stranger anymore but as a mirror. He hadn't stayed, nor had she. Yet in their crossing they had exchanged something that couldn't be returned. The suitcase was his, but the silence that belonged to both of them now, reshaped into something that could breathe. In the distance a train whistle echoed, sharp, fleeting. She leaned her forehead against the cool glass, eyes tracing the faint trail of steam curling above the rooftops. She didn't feel the same ache of loneliness anymore. What she felt was something deeper. The strange relief of being seen even once. She whispered it again, to no one in particular. "Not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever." The night swallowed her words, carrying them down empty streets, into places where silence had its own language. And in that silence a question lingered, unresolved but alive. Is change a gift, or just another kind of loss?